Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Capers Business Ventures Connect podcast. We'd love for you to subscribe and looking forward to your reviews of our episodes. If you're interested in becoming a guest on our podcast, we'd love to have you. So please visit us at cbbservices.com/podcast, and we'll be in touch. We're glad you're here, and we're ready to get started. Are you ready to give back to society and make this a better world? Well, you're in luck because our next guest is doing it every day. So let's connect. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me at the Capers Business Ventures Connect podcast. I'm your host, Mel Capers, and I'm delighted and excited to be here with you. And before we get going, let me just give pause and give thanks to my great creator for allowing me just another opportunity to do his will on this side of heaven. I also want to take this time to shout out some good friends, Tasha and Kevin White. They are co-founders of Vanguardian Global, doing amazing things at Vanguardian Global, and you need to check them out. Please go to their website at vanguardianglobal.com. I also want to shout out a good friend. She is Sonia Pinckney Rhodes. She is founder and chief executive of J.M. Pinckney Publishing. She is doing incredible work, so you need to check her out as well. Please go to her website at jmpinkneypublishing.com. Also want to send a big shout out to a good friend. She is Ronalda Sullivan. She is founder and chief executive of Dream Differently. Dream Differently is a company where Ronalda coaches mothers with children with autism. Please check her out. She is at dreamdifferently.org. In this episode, we're happy to have with us an amazing individual. He is Mr. Sherman Gillums. He is a retired U.S. Marine Corps officer and former senior executive at Paralyzed Veterans of America and AMVETS, two of the largest congressionally chartered veteran service organizations in the country. Today, he's the Chief Strategy and Impact Officer at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. It is a delight to have him here, and we are going to meet him in our first segment we call the Meet and Greet segment. So here we are with my guest. I am absolutely delighted. I'm over the moon because I have with me an amazing gentleman. His name is Sherman Gillums. And you know what? Instead of me messing it up and trying to tell you what his bio looks like, he'll tell you. But let me just first thank God that he has agreed to come on with me. And I just want to say, hello, how are you? And tell the world who Sherman Gillums is.
I appreciate that, Melvin. I don't know about how amazing my bio is, but I did try to live a life of service. I started in the Marine Corps back in 1990 as a 17-year-old looking for an identity, like a lot of young men and women who joined the military. I served for 12 years, got to serve overseas, got to deploy once, had a ball. It was this whole idea of a new identity. that made it feel like, to me, this is where I was meant to be for the rest of the time I can be active. And then after about 12 years, I just become commissioned to the rank of Chief Warrant Officer 2. I was in a crash that injured me, and not only did it end my career, but in many ways, I felt back then that it stripped me of my identity. So I spent about 2 years of rehabilitation in San Diego, at the Spinal Cord Injury Center. But then, God has a funny way of deciding how the story will proceed. And at that point, because I was helped by an organization, I saw myself doing exactly that. I saw myself being an advocate who had been through the experience. And as I got better and saw other people having the same experience that I did, I decided that I wanted to get into mission work. I call it mission work, not nonprofit, not social sector, it's mission work. And I joined Paralyzed Veterans of America, first as a service officer, moved up to work at the appeals office in DC, and I became the executive director of the organization. And we got to move a lot of legislation. I got to audit hospitals. So I got to do the DC part, but also got to visit many of the VA spinal cord injury centers. And we did top-down audits that were more person-centered than anything. And so I got to appreciate the importance of healthcare by looking at individuals, not broad classes, but by that person's life. And that informed a lot of the work that I would get into with respect to veteran suicide prevention.
What year was that? I mean, you said you retired or you got out of the Marine Corps, but what year was that?
That was in 2002.
Oh, okay.
When I got out, yeah. So it's been a while. I mean, time has flown. I can't believe it's been 20 years since then, but that's how long we've been in that state of war, in the Middle East. And but the time just flew by for me. But there's an after, there's a story after that doesn't stop when people finish deployment or they get their discharge. Their lives continue, and a lot of those lives end prematurely for many reasons. And so I'm on that side of the mission where, we thank veterans for their service by living up to the promise that this country gave to them. And it doesn't always happen. And it takes people like me who have been through it to jump back into the hole, I call it, jump back in, show them that there's a way out of here, but it's not easy. And so I've been doing that up till now, from 2004 really up till now, and it had taken me to the Capitol Hill. I've testified for Congress on different issues. It's taken me across media, but now I'm at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, trying to figure out this idea of lived experience not being a sentence, a prison sentence. You can live with a lot of things, but if stigma and marginalization persist, then you have people who get desperate and lose hope, and some choose to take their lives. So that's been a part of my work for the last year and a half, actually a little bit longer than that. I came to NAMI about a year and a half ago, but that's what I'm doing now. And it's beyond veterans at this point. It's really the family and the community, and how we start there to promote wellness, not just veterans, police officers, anybody who's in the service industry, where it's pretty dangerous. So that's kind of those are the cliff notes. I've been to college, I've done other things, but I'm most proudest of the investment and mission work that I've given over the last 2 decades.
Sherman, let me go back with you just a little bit. When you got out of the Marine Corps, how did you transition from serving in the Marine Corps in the uniform to serving everybody in the organization you're in now? I mean, was it like, well, I just need to do this, or did you go through a period of, oh my God, why am I here? I mean, tell us about that process.
The first 2 years after I got out of the Marine Corps, I thought, well, I can leave all that behind. I don't have to pull any of that trying to be a leader baggage and all those things about the Marine Corps that are a part of being a complete person. That was lost. That was gone. And I spent about 2 years caught in a kind of a whirlwind of self-pity, of feeling not like a human being. And so I didn't treat myself like a human being. I spent a lot of time hiding from society. I would sleep all day and stay up all night, so I wouldn't have to deal with anybody in real life. And that became my life. Now, here's an example of how you can turn something that's supposed to be negative into something useful. You know, I stayed in depression, I stayed in anxiety. In those low points of depression, I got really creative. And that's how the depressed mind can work for some people. I got really creative and I began to write. I didn't know what it was for. I would just write. And then I would read books and not read them just for, you know, the enjoyment, but read for the mechanics of writing, like what made this a good book. And I would read books from all authors. And I got a sense of what makes good writing. And it's really about being people focused, your audience focused. You know, when you serve, it's the individuals that you should be focused on. And so I would learn to write for the audience. And that flowered into an interest in law. So I got involved in law, reading legal, reading about legal theory. All these things became what I would consume during this time I was depressed and cut off from the world. And then at some point, I went to a support group, and it was a little survey instrument, a little checklist. And I said I was depressed, but I didn't know that. I didn't know what to be depressed mean. I know what it feels like, but I didn't know what it meant. And I checked off almost every box on that checklist. I went to the work group mediator, who is today a good friend of mine, Dr. Muse, and said, hey, you know, this thing is saying that, I hit all these markers. What should I do? And that began, it really began the journey of self-understanding at that point, because I could unload a lot of the stuff I carried around even before I joined the Marine Corps. And I was never connected to that person. I kind of left that person behind to become a Marine. And after I got out, I had to go back and be that person, you know, and I had so many unresolved issues that I had to deal with that first. And so when I was able to deal with things that started when I was younger, a lot younger, and talk about why I ran away and looked for that new identity, I began to form into my authentic self, I believe. And the Marine Corps was only a chapter or a few chapters in that, but I had always been that person. It was like skipping over those chapters to jump right in the middle of a book. You miss so much context if you start there. And so by accepting who I was before I was a Marine, I could easily kind of fold it into who I became as a Marine on the surface, but I was still the same person. And that became the way the story proceeded at that point. And when I decided in 2004 to go to work, it was for the express purpose of helping people who had been in that type of place. So I couldn't have realized that purpose had I not gone through it, right? And that made it sort of self-fulfilling to know that I had a toolbox of survivor stories, and hardships that became the instruments of my advocacy. And I could speak with authority on those issues because I lived through them.
And we're pleased to have with us Sherman Gillums, a retired U.S. Marine Corps officer and former senior executive of Paralyzed Veterans of America. Today, Sherman is the Chief Strategy and Impact Officer at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. And Sherman, if you will, just tell us a little bit more about NAMI.
The National Alliance on Mental Illness is an organization that's comprised mostly by people with what we call lived experience, meaning we have lived it. A lot of us have had depression, had anxiety, had all these things. And so what we do is we try to understand the lived experience as it's evolved over time and create supports and programs. And more importantly, just know that they're represented. This thing about mental illness being having a stigma, that's not new. It's been around for a long time. So this is just a flaw in our humanity. That's not new, but being almost proud of who you are and being open about who you are and what you're going through. And in some cases, it may mean saying, look, I've got pretty bad depression. I'm gonna let y'all know that right now. I'm gonna need to go into my cave and be creative. So what y'all are seeing is not, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not being antisocial. I'm just trying to get right. And if it's okay with y'all, I'm gonna take some time to do that. We couldn't have those conversations a long time ago, but at NAMI, we get to make it okay to open up and talk about what you're going through, because chances are somebody who's going through the same thing is going to hear that and be empowered by that. So I take a lot of pride at NAMI in being able to bring those stories to light, have people allowed to be their authentic self, albeit imperfect, but authentic. And that's what NAMI does. And so I'm really proud of that work.
When you talk about NAMI, I wonder, do people seek you out, or do you have a way to get in touch with folks who are dealing with issues that you're talking about?
This is a great relevant question, and here's why. Some people seek it out because they feel like they're entitled to that help, and that's great. Everybody should feel entitled to that help. The people that don't are often the people who, in general, are marginalized, and people who don't seek help because this idea that they deserve help is not one that characterizes their view of healing and treatment, especially in the Black community where I grew up. You didn't ask for help. It was a sign of weakness, or maybe not even just the Black community, maybe among men, maybe among military people. There are some people who gravitate to services that help them, and then there are some you got to pull them in. And recently, we've been really focused on youth. Youth don't typically go to mom and dad and say, "Hey, I feel this way. I need help." You have to have some way of identifying what might be an issue or the symptoms of an issue, and know how to probe deeper. So it's a mix, really. It's the people that come to us that know about NAMI, they'll come, they'll look for resources, especially parents or spouses who have a loved one that they want to get help for. But people we worry about are those who live with the problem and don't even know that this help is out there. So we do have to seek them out. So we'll go to college campuses where we know kids are having a hard time. We'll go to first responders and talk to training departments and say, "Hey, if you've got this need for us to kind of pull out some of these issues in your unit without having to identify people, we can just have a workshop and talk through some of the things that they might be going through." So it's a mix, and it depends on who we're targeting.
Wow. I could stay in this segment all day with you, but I promised that I wasn't going to take all of your time. But I'm telling you, it's intriguing. But we do need to get to our next segment. Let me just ask you, are you ready to get to the next segment?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Well, here we are in our segment we call On the Horizon. This is where we find out from our guests what's coming up, what's going on. What do you have on the horizon, Sherman Gillums? What's coming up?
This has been an amazing start to an amazing year. I may be producing my own television spot later this fall, not this fall, this spring, featuring leaders who have been, that iron sharpens iron thing. Sometimes you don't get to that point unless you've been through something. I want to focus on leaders who have evolved through hardship, and they could be military leaders. It could be, just people in the community who have done some things. So I've got that teed up. I'll be doing a TED Talk in April about being genuine and being good to yourself and embracing the stranger, and not estranging yourself from your identity. So that's up. And then we've got a good year, a great year of events where we're going to focus on youth leadership and having young people be a part of being a part of these platforms and developing their own advocacy agenda. We saw a lot of this after the spate of school shootings a few years ago, where the young people had to do it. They were like, "We're going to have to do this ourselves because y'all aren't getting it figured out." We see the same thing with climate change and other issues where young people have had to do that. But right now it's tough because young people are sitting behind computers and not allowed to go into the classroom and socialize and be their full selves. So this will be a different time for this generation, but we want to pull them out of the shadows, have them give themselves their identity back. They're not statistics, they're actual people. So we're going to spend this whole 2022 focusing on young people, walking them through the challenges of mental health and all the things that come with being alive at this time, and hopefully, help this generation get a better, have a better start this year than they did last year, when a lot of them were navigating these spaces for the first time under COVID.
So you said you wrote a lot. So obviously you have what, 5 or 6 books already published, right?
I didn't write books. I keep, everybody hits me with that question, but I wrote a lot of commentary for the purpose of moving legislation. And I'll tell you, I found out it worked once I began to address some of the issues in the VA. And I had the incoming VA secretary, who I had a relationship with through a previous professional experience, come out of my office and ask me, why did you write that? What was that about? It was criticism of the VA from the perspective of holding on to mid-level management leaders too long, and having those people, they're anonymized by their position, but they're making the most consequential decisions and nobody knows them. And I wrote in my op-ed, I said, that's the layer that needs to get stripped away, or at least delve into what's going on there. And I don't think he did a whole lot of that except to understand my point. So I found out then that people read these, they read commentary, they read op-eds, but also have the ability to pick up the phone and talk to congressional representatives. So it behooved that particular secretary to just hear me out. I'll explain what I meant by it. But a lot of commentary based on stories I was hearing. I did some work in getting fertility assistance for severely wounded veterans, because for about 20 years, they couldn't get that in the VA. And so I would go issue by issue, do commentary around it, do a little media around it. And that by itself could probably be a book, all that advocacy. But I still say that I haven't done anything important enough to write a book about it. So until that happens, I'll just be writing my commentary and doing the things to move the needle in DC.
Everybody seemed to be influenced by someone. So I'm going to ask this question and see if you can give me some names. Mm-hmm. I'm a basketball fanatic, and the 1992 Dream Team was always something that I thought was amazing, Mm-hmm. So here's my question to you. If you had to put a dream team together of people, and you're one of 5 members of this dream team, who would the other 4 members be on your team?
Probably, I would start with my mom. I would start with her because she, as I look at her now and as she ages and has to deal with that, she's always looked young to me. She still looks young to me, but in her mind, she's kind of getting to that point. And for a while, I didn't realize how much influence she had on my life. I didn't realize how much I had patterned myself after her until I had my own kids and began to have the same sort of express myself the same way she would to me. And so I think I start with her because without her, I wouldn't exist. Not just, biologically, but who I am I wouldn't be as intact and able to deal with the hardship, extreme hardships that I've dealt with. I've never seen her give up on anything. And this is a woman who didn't drive a car. She walked everywhere, and took buses and navigated cities, never seemed to embrace comfort. And I think I got a little bit of that in me. So I would lean on her as the center of this dream team. And then I've got a litany of leaders who are part of my development in different ways. No one person. I have a mentor who brought me up in PVA named Homer Townsend, who was the first person to not just give me my first break, but let me fall on my face and not punish me for it. Time after time after time after time. So I would trust him with my life, God rest his soul. But he would be somebody I would depend on to be that sort of that wise leader, he never made me feel bad for making decisions that weren't right. But he always made me think through the lesson, and do better. So that's 2 people. And then I could probably pull a bunch of sergeants major. I can pull out a captain here or there, somebody who supported me in the journey. That bench would be really deep. I mean, I would probably have to have about 20 on that bench, and I can pull any one of them at any time, depending on what was happening. So I've been surrounded by some great people. I would just go with Homer and my mom as the stability, as the 2 that I probably wouldn't move, but I could put any number of people in those last 3 spots.
So I love your dream team. I think that's awesome. That's incredible.
Well, I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't say this. My wife is a 12-year Army veteran, 18 months in Afghanistan, and raised kids. She is amazing. So I would have to probably put her in that spot now that I'm thinking about it. I definitely have to have my wife on the squad.
Okay, what's her name? What's your wife's name?
Her name is Tammy. She just lost her dad recently. In fact, she's dealing with a lot of those affairs right now. He was a Vietnam veteran.
Wow.
And she was his only child. So that's been a tough time for her. But again, I'm watching her navigate this hardship strong, dependable, still doing the job. So I would definitely have to have her on my dream team.
It's an amazing dream team. Think about that. Have you had your dream team? Oh my goodness. Well, that's all right. Listen, we are about to get into our final segment, which we call the Connect segment. You ready to get to the Connect segment?
I am ready.
Let's do it. Well, here we are in the Connect segment. This is where we connect you with the world, Sherman. So now is a good time to tell everybody who's listening in, how do they connect with Sherman Gillums?
I am on LinkedIn, and I don't have the kind of account where it blocks you out, so I invite people to not just connect, but read about the things that I post, because I talk about things that are pretty broad and consequential to society. But I get a lot of connections through there. I don't do too much Facebook and Twitter, but I do read it. And when people occasionally connect with me based on some story I posted or something I posted about our work at NAMI, I'll get people that'll inbox me and we'll have conversations about different things. But I think that's the best way to kind of generally connect. But you can find me at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I work there as a Chief Strategy and Impact Officer. It perfectly describes what I'm there to do, is to strategize and have impact. So I'm not hard to find at all.
Well, let me ask you this before we get out of here, because this is the time I give my guests an opportunity to shout folks out. So who would you like to shout out?
There are so many people who come to mind, but I want to shout out the one individual who might be listening to my voice right now, who has felt broken and got stronger in that broken place and moved on to help somebody else. I want to shout out all the silent heroes who are doing the work of helping people find their way back to life. And we don't say thank you enough to doctors, nurses, police officers, firefighters, moms, dads, people who are doing the grunt work to help keep us sane in this society. So I want to shout out anybody who has felt unappreciated, underappreciated, and needs some encouragement right now.
And my friend, you being in the same room with anyone, or being virtually, or being on the line with them, will always change their lives, because that's who you are. Again, thank you so much for being who you are, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here. All the best to you, and God be with you until we meet again, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast, Capers Business Ventures Connect. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So please like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn at Capers Business Ventures, and on Instagram and Twitter, you can find us at CBV Services. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.